I'm going to show you how to make a dead simple soil mix that your plants are going to love, and it's dead easy to make. It doesn't involve you going to the shops and having to buy 20 ingredients to make. The base mix that I'm going to make only has 3 ingredients. That's all you need for your base mix. Then there's a couple of additions that we can make to amend it for specific plants in our collection. So I've only got 5 ingredients on my table here, and that's all you need to make a good houseplant mix that all your plants are going to love. So we're going to make a base mix, and then from that we're going to make 3 additional mixes that's going to cover all the bases of all the plants in your house. Now, so the main ingredient for a good soil mix is going to be something like coconut coir. That's what I tend to use, and it's what most indoor soil mixes tend to have as their base. And that's because it's inert. It doesn't have living organisms in it like a compost or a soil would, and that's what we want for indoor plants. We don't want to have all living organisms in our indoor plants, and that's going to attract things like fungus gnats into our soil, and we want to avoid that as much as possible, as far as we can. So coconut coir will come in a brick like this. I bought this online, bought this on Amazon, so you will be able to easily find it wherever you are in the world. So I've got a brick like this. I think there were 6 in a pack. So this has been dehydrated and compressed into this brick. So all it involves is popping it into a box, a tote box of some description, and then adding 3 litres of warm water on top, and then leaving it for half an hour, and then it'll expand into a mixture like this. So it becomes a nice fluffy texture. So coconut coir is just processed from coconut husks, and it's just a really nice fluffy texture that's going to retain moisture but not too much moisture. It doesn't become kind of dense and overly saturated like compost or soil would. So this is perfect for our base. Now, on its own, coconut coir isn't going to be perfect for your plants because it will tend to hold on to moisture probably more than most of our indoor plants would like. So we need to amend it with something that's going to allow water to run through, going to aid drainage, make it nice and light. And pretty much every houseplant mix out there has this ingredient, which is just good old perlite. Whoops, already dropped it in. So perlite is just a lightweight volcanic rock. So it's dead light, it's almost like polystyrene. And it's just really super porous, and it just means that the water is going to run through our soil mix dead easy, and it's not going to hold on to moisture, which is exactly what our house plants want. So I reckon we want about, it's not an exact science, just kind of go with your gut feeling really, but I reckon about 20% perlite, 80% coconut coir. So I'm going to add about that much in, I think. And I'll give that a good mix. So I did wet my perlite a little bit. I've got a sprayer, so I put my perlite in the box outside, and then I've gone through and I've just wetted it down a little bit, just because it's very dusty perlite and it can be quite bad for you to breathe in, bad for your lungs. So I just wetted it down with a sprayer in the box, and that prevented the dust flying everywhere indoors. So I'm just going to go through and give this a bit of a mix, like so. Get that in there. That's not fully mixed yet, but I want to add one more ingredient to really make this soil mix sing. It's not absolutely essential that you use this next thing that I'm going to use. It is something that I like to add. You really could just stick to coconut coir and perlite, and that will suffice for a lot of your plants. You don't need to overcomplicate it by adding all sorts of pumice and bits of coconut husks and all that kind of stuff. But what I do like to add is this. This is activated carbon or activated charcoal. So I do like to add some of this. I'm going to add maybe 10%, something like that. Now that's going to absorb moisture, excess moisture. It's going to help absorb excess moisture in the soil mix. And then it's going to absorb mould and odours. It's going to stop your soil mix going smelly. I don't know if you've ever found that when you look after your plants, if you go a bit too close to them, they tend to smell sometimes, don't they? They tend to smell a bit mouldy. So activated carbon is going to help with that because it's going to be super absorbent. And it's also going to help prevent mould kind of developing in your soil mix over time. And that's going to help keep root rot at bay and things like that. And it's also going to help with drainage as well. It's going to act in the same way as perlite. It's going to create those air pockets in the soil that the plant roots are going to absolutely love. So I'm just getting in there. I'm just trying to mix it as much as I can. You will find that as you tend to use this mix, that you just tend to go through and mix it as you go, really. But I try to get in there and give it a good mix right at the bottom. Okay, I think that's good enough. So this is our base mix, and this is good for a lot of our plants. So Pothos will be quite happy in this mix. What else have we got? Tradescantias will be happy in this mix. Ficus elastica will be happy in this mix because it holds on to moisture, but it doesn't kind of hold on to water too long. So the perlite and the activated carbon is going to allow it to drain through properly. So that's exactly what we want. I've got dirty hands. So from our base mix, we're now going to make 3 specific mixes for 3 specific kind of groups of plants. Got soil all over my table, hopefully Mr. Sheffield doesn't see. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to add our base mix to these 3 boxes. Give that a quick once over. So don't worry too much about quantities. I was very rough with how much I added, but you can kind of, as you get more experience with making your own soil, you can kind of see whether it's going to be porous enough or it's going to hold on to enough moisture for your plants. So this is looking pretty good. To our base mix, this is going to be our box for our group of plants like calophyas and ferns and coleus. Plants that don't tend to like having their soil dry out too quickly. They like the moisture to stay quite evenly moist. Now this mix is already pretty good, but to help with that, we can add some of this, which is vermiculite. So vermiculite, again, I think is a volcanic rock, but this is not like perlite. Don't think of it like perlite. It's kind of doing the opposite of perlite. It's holding on to moisture. So we're going to add a little bit of that into there. So I often find, I don't know if you find this as well, with my calophyas and particularly my coleus, that they dry out very quickly. I'm having to water my coleus twice a week, minimum, maybe even more, in the summer months. The soil just dries out too quickly and I'm finding they go very limp very quickly. So I did a repotting of my coleus maybe a month ago, maybe a bit more. Well, I added some vermiculite to my mix and it's really helped kind of the coleus be happier basically by the soil not drying out too much. And that's all there is to it. So that is, how many ingredients was that? 4 ingredients for a calophea, coleus and fern mix. So I do like vermiculite because it looks like little gold specks in the soil. So you can add a bit more carbon or perlite if you wanted to, if you found that the mix wasn't draining quickly enough for your calopheas or your coleus or ferns, but I think that'll be a good mix. Now our next group is going to be our aroids. I'm going to make an aroid mix from our base mix. And to that, we just need to add some bark. So this is orchid bark, rather than the kind of decorative landscape bark that you find on the in the outside of your garden centre, in those big bags. This is kind of a bit cleaner. This is orchid bark. So it's kind of not been hanging around outside, and it's not going to have, like, I don't know, potentially like bugs and other bits and pieces that our houseplants don't particularly want. So I'm going to add a decent amount of this to our mix, because aroids, they really like their soil to dry out quickly. So aroids is your plants like Monstera, Philodendron, Pothos. I think Alocasia is an aroid. Anthuriums. So they like to dry out quickly. Their roots don't like sitting in soggy soil. They're kind of used to growing on like the surface of the jungle, the forest floor of the jungle. So I'm just going to give this a mix. So this will make it extra light, which just means that water's going to really pass through this mix dead easy. It's not going to be lingering around, potentially rooting the roots of our aroid plants. So I think I might add a touch more. So it does want to be super chunky. Now you could, instead of bark, use coconut husks, little coconut chips, but I find they're harder to get hold of. You will be able to find orchid bark in your local garden centre. We should be able to anyway. It'll be in the houseplant section. And hopefully it won't be too expensive. Coconut husks you probably have to buy online. I've not been able to find any in my local garden centres. So there you have it. That is a nice chunky mix. So it's going to hold on to moisture just enough for our aroids to want to continue to grow. But the added bark is going to really help it drain nicely. And then our final group of plants is succulents and cacti. Now to that, lots of people say to add pumice and sand and all the rest, but I find you don't really need all that. I don't really like using sand in my houseplant mixes. I tend to find that the water takes a long time to travel through sand, particularly when you've got coconut core. So all I'm going to do is just add some additional perlite, and quite a lot of it. That might not be enough, but we'll see how we get on. So you can use pumice if you wanted to, or pom, just to really give it a gritty texture. That's what succulents and cacti really want. So the core in here is good because it will retain moisture, but then you have to make it extra gritty so that the soil doesn't stay wet for too long, because succulents and cacti, as well as jade plants and things like that, and even snake plants, they store water in their leaves. So if the soil is always wet or staying wet for too long, then you run into problems with mushy leaves and stems potentially. So I think I need to add a touch more perlite. So the reason I'm using perlite is just to avoid me having to buy another ingredient from the store. If I just buy a big bag of perlite, which is what I tend to do, a 100 litre bag of perlite lives in my shed, and then that will suffice for a lot of my plants. So I'm giving that a good mix. There you go. Looks nice, doesn't it? So you could, if you wanted to, add some bark as well. So I might just finish that bark off. Pop that in there. That's just going to aid in the drainage even further. We can do that. Add a bit more if we wanted to, but really I find perlite to be just good enough. I've got lots of succulents and cacti in my house, and they are fine with a mix like this. That's all she is. So there's that mix. And my two specific mixes for caliphares and aroids. And then I've got my base mix here. And that's all there is to it. Doesn't have to be overly complicated. And I just used 5 ingredients. Now I wouldn't add fertilizer to soil mixes. I know that can be tempted to put something like bloodfish and bone or something in your indoor soil mixes, but it's not really advisable. One, because it smells and it attracts things like fungus gnats and potentially other like ants and stuff. And it's better just to water your plants with fertilizer. Use a liquid feed rather than put it in your soil mix. That's all there is to it. Dead simple. For your next viewing pleasure, make sure you watch this video up here, and I'll see you there.